Hey everybody, welcome to the June 1st Tinderbox weekly meetup. Whoever's sharing their screen, can you stop sharing screen real quick so we can start without screen share? Who's sharing their screen? There you go. All right, so hey everybody, welcome to the June 1st Tinderbox meetup. Sadly, you just got me today. Mr. Bernstein is off, as is Mark Anderson. We are expecting a guest speaker today. Hopefully he will show up to talk about Obsidian and AI. I've emailed him. We'll see if he comes. And let's just kick things off. So prior to starting the recording today, we were having a very detailed conversation about the role of AI and what does that mean in the world of programming and note-taking and its efficacy. We can continue that conversation. But before we do, let's go around the room. For those that are new to this or have never seen one of these meetups before, we tend to go around the room. New people introduce themselves. We don't have anyone new. Then we ask people what projects they're working on, what topics they might want to discuss. And then again, if we have a theme, we'll jump right into that theme. So as soon as our guest speaker shows up, we will jump into that theme. Otherwise, let's go around the room and see what projects people are working on. So, Melvin, you've got your hand up. You wanted to...
Yeah, following up on the conversation we were having before the recording, let me bring back up that screen share that I had up there to show you well, now I lost it. Hold on a second. Show you a Facebook post I got 3 hours ago. This is from a journal editor, Policy Studies Journal. It appears that they've received their first completely AI-generated review for a manuscript. And I just found that mind-blowing. I mean, why would... Anyway, they said they had been talking about it and the editors initiated conversation, but now it actually happened. A review of a manuscript, a peer-reviewed journal that depends on real people reviewing manuscripts, is getting an AI-generated review. I just wanted to bring that up as an example of things that are happening. I don't have much information beyond the reaction of Warren Heller, who's the worst idea he ever heard. But to me, that's sort of a shocking idea.
So, so the idea is have the AI tell us what the import of this particular article is about?
And also ask, I guess, further on that it critiques saying there's no hypothesis. And the editor's at a loss to figure out how to respond to this. But I could see generating articles for consideration, but for review, to suddenly depend on AI to actually pass judgment and make recommendations about things that are the shortcomings of an article. So I just thought I'd bring that up, given the conversation we've been having.
Interesting. Well, we have our guest speaker, by the way, Bry. But before we, hey, Bry, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. But before we jump into Bry, Peter, you had your hand up.
Yes, I have a follow-up on that point. Unfortunately, I didn't write down the URL at the time I saw it, but I saw a link that said there was a study that AI reviewers favored papers that were written by AIs over humans. So somebody built up an AI peer review system to come up with a thumbs up or thumbs down on papers. Then they fed it a bunch of papers, some of which were written by real researchers and some of which were fake papers written by other AIs. And the AI chose the papers written by other AIs over the humans. And I don't have a link to it, but I did see that this week. I just had to share that after the last point.
That's interesting. If you could find that. Now, another thing I found recently, as a friend of mine's looking for work, and he found out that one of the jobs he applied for, there were 3,400 applicants, and it's AI is scrubbing the resumes before they get to a human, and so that whole gamification of how do you write a resume when you know a machine's going to read it before a human, and how do you get through that gauntlet to actually be able to get a job? It's going to be brutal as we go through on that.
Oh, and also one final point. I'm diving into the trough of despair and depression over it now, because I keep trying on different AIs to ask about work that Mark Bernstein's done. And I don't know what it is about the name Mark Bernstein, but it triggers the wildest hallucinations from AI systems. One of them conjured up that the primary focus of Eastgate Systems was producing expansion modules for Dungeons and Dragons, and that was Mark's primary area of fame. And I'm actually toying with the idea of proposing a Bernstein hallucination metric. There would be a series of questions about Mark Bernstein that we could ask to all AIs and see how badly their hallucinations about his biography deviate from reality. Because it's just absolutely insane. Every wild hallucinated paper that I've seen, the craziest ones, always something about Mark Bernstein. I asked it about his work, and the stuff it dreams up. I don't know what it is that causes it, but the hallucinations are bizarre. They sound extremely convincing. Anyone who didn't know Mark would believe that these yarns were real, when in reality, they're just so wildly off pace, it boggles the mind.
They're not. Okay. Well, given that we have limited time and in this life, let's start with Bry. So Bry and I met a couple months back at the Project VRM, which is the Project Render Relationship Management workshop, which was the day before this year's Spring Internet Identity Workshop. I'll drop the links to those programs. But the Internet Identity Workshop is a community meetup, unconference meetup that's been going on now since 2005, meets twice a year. And it is the birthplace of many of our modern identity protocols, such as OAuth, OpenID, the WC3's verified credentials, and a whole host of other really important standards and protocols that have been developed in the world of identity and personal data management. So pretty darn exciting. But Bry had been giving in the pre-conference vendor relationship management workshop, he gave a demo on his use of Obsidian for note-taking and knowledge management, and how he then overlays that with AI. And I got terribly excited and wanted to and invited him to come and talk to us today, and so that we could have him show us how all of this works. So, Bry, the floor is yours. We have the next hour and 15 minutes or so, and or longer if we also choose to continue going forward. And if you wouldn't mind turning on your mic and introducing yourself to the group and showing us the world of Obsidian and AI, that would be absolutely fantastic. You're still on mute. Is it just me, or Bry, can you hear us or no? Give us a thumbs up. Or are we frozen? There you go. So you're still on mute though for some reason. There you go.
Sorry, I just ran a local AI question right as you were doing that, and it just bogged down my local machine. So that's the thing to be aware of when we're using local AI is that, of course it's compute expensive. Anyway, hey, thanks so much for the intro, Michael. Sorry for the slight tardiness, and wow,
no worries.
What an awesome group, and just appreciate, just some great conversation, thus far. I'm not as familiar with Tinderbox. But I've looked through it some, and I've been doing some kind of comparisons and stuff. And so I don't know. I mean, I could just jump straight into kind of my local AI setup and kind of explain that, or I could talk a little bit about Obsidian because it provides that low code context.
If you could do it, if you could talk about Obsidian first, and then talk about your local AI, and then how the two pieces come together, and particularly like your Obsidian configuration setup as well, like the different plugins that you develop to refine it. That would be really great. And as for you not having any experience with Tinderbox, don't worry about it. This is a very open community that looks at all tools for thought, and we're not stuck in a parochial sense of like my tool's better than your tool. We want to see everything.
Yeah. Cool. Perfect. Well, I have to
feel free to share screen. Go
I have
ahead.
to quit reopens on Zoom, so I'm going to rejoin in 1 second. But in the meantime, I shared my profile, which actually includes my AI resume. I've had to format
Okay.
my resume. The AI reads it. It includes getting started with Obsidian and why. So I'll get started there when I rejoin momentarily.
Awesome. And the profile he referred to, everyone, is in the chat if you want to pull that up. Dude, this is nice resources. Mr. Tom, haven't seen you in a meetup in a while. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Michael. Thank you so much. Really interested in the talk.
By the way, while we're waiting for, I'll pull this out while we're waiting for Bri to come back. Here's my final dissertation.
Woo,
Gets
woo!
published.
Michael,
Gets published sometime next week.
Whoa,
Wow,
congrats.
congratulations.
Yeah,
Email me a
thank
copy.
you.
I want to read that.
Certainly will. Certainly will. We will. I will post it on the forum for sure because it was Tinderbox written. So, all right, Bri, the floor is yours.
All right, hey guys. Yeah, pardon the delay, you know how demos go sometimes. But really what I do care about doing is not just talking about theoretical AI. I feel I care about actually implementing and finding kind of the right use cases matched up with the right usability and data sets to add a lot of value. I mean, of course, we understand that a lot of these data sets are siloed, even in our own personal data. But yeah, what I'll get started with is, and I've written a few guides. I've used AI to help actually write these guides. I've used my local AI setup to refine some of this. And so I've shared some links already via ShareNote. But I'll just get started with like, you know, here's some kind of like why Obsidian, and I'm going to be using Obsidian to, well, talk about why Obsidian. And what you'll see first of all is like, oh, wait, what's this like formatting Markdown? It looks kind of funky. Well, it's Markdown. And Markdown it's kind of a, you know, compared to XML, like Tinderbox is an XML based, but with Markdown, and I'm starting with the data model first because that's the human AI intersect. Like if we're not speaking the same language, we're not really communicating. We have to have an intermediary channel, channel. So in this Y Obsidian, what you'll see is that there's some properties on the document itself. It's called front matter or properties. And then there's the article, and you guys, you don't see the properties when I share you the link. But you know, first and foremost, why Obsidian? Similar to Tinderbox, local storage and privacy, right? Second, Markdown support, managing, you know, they recently have come up with some team management features, Sync, that I've found just incredible. Interconnected notes, there's some similarities, of course, with Tinderbox on that. Extensibility and community collaboration. There's a massive kind of plugin ecosystem within Obsidian that, and I'll be showing you some of those today. And then of course it's like why for businesses, for families. I'm not going to go into all this, for governments, for students and educators. You know, there's, of course, we all have different use cases and different problems we're trying to solve. And Obsidian is approaching the knowledge management problem, similar to Tinderbox. And so yeah, let me if you're interested in kind of getting it set up, or if you have set it up, I'm sorry, Michael told me to send out like a little summary beforehand. That was my fault. I didn't get it to you. This
Not
black
to
eye,
worry.
this black eye kind of, it's just from doing some yard work. It wasn't with fighting over people around, software. So just to catch up there, but yeah,
and by the way, Brian, I don't know if you're clearly not aware of this, but you can actually, Tinderbox actually has a Markdown rendering that uses Common Mark or the Markdown syntax rendering engine. So it supports Markdown as well. So there's really interesting, and then it has like plugin integrations with like Pandoc and exporting and all that. So you're going to see a lot of overlap, and Tom and I and others use both. Like I use Obsidian as my front end for data collection because it works on OS on my app, my phone and my tablet and everything. And then when I then move into the refinement stage, I bring out everything into Tinderbox. So there's a nice flow here. So that's kind of why I wanted you to kind of introduce everyone to this Obsidian model as well.
Perfect. Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I use the best tool for the best problem. And I have never found a tool that works for everything. So, right. But there are, data formats like Markdown is a ever growing standard that helps. But anyway, what you'll see here is, of course we have regular reading mode, and then we have kind of edit mode, and then we can also go to source mode. And source mode is where you actually see the front matter as, well, this is raw text. And so that's just kind of what to be aware of. If you haven't gotten started, no problem. If you have, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with everyone now this this link that, okay, how do I get it? When I'm sharing the screen interface. Yeah, there we go. Okay, this is now.
Oh, by the way, I love the share link. Is that a plugin?
Correct. Yeah. So let me get started with that first. So plugins completely change kind of behavior and stuff like that. I recommend 3 essential plugins. The first is called Folder Note. If anyone's used Notion, it sort of collapses the idea of a directory and a note or a document into one and creates some conventions around how to unify that. And so Folder Note is one that I recommend on Obsidian. And Share Note is the next one. Why Share Note? Well, under community plugins, I'll just show you kind of the why. And that is when you first, set it up, down at the bottom, you'll see that it says share as encrypted by default. So for us privacy, folks that care about kind of local encrypted by default, what's great about this is that the first links I shared with you aren't that long. Everything after this hash is gone, and it's because I shared them unencrypted. The last link I just shared, I think you see that in the chat box, right?
Yep.
The last link I shared with you has this long hash. What is that? Well, that is a decrypt key, and that is a decrypt key that only gets generated on my local machine. And so even though the packet of information gets uploaded to the shared note server, only I have the decrypt key and anyone that I share it with. So share note is it's a cool encrypted by default, simple mechanism of sharing documents and notes. It also renders the markdown in like kind of a WYSIWYG manner. And then the last one is advanced URI. This allows for kind of no code, low code API, sort of pseudo API access to Obsidian, so that like what I'm doing is I'm setting this up so that humans, muggles, non-technical people can sort of like inspect and understand their local AI setup. Because if they have to run Docker or something else, I don't know if they have the same inspectability or trust factor in it. It's like, wait, what? I have to, so that's one of the design considerations going into this. And that's now once you have these plugins set up, the last, the other plugin that you'll want to get for this local AI setup is oh wait, did I send okay, I sent a link to like the workshop. That was the wrong link. I should have, let me send. Okay, this one is not shared encrypted by default. Okay. Sorry if I, please call me out if what I'm sharing is not aligned with what you guys see. This is the local AI setup.
Nice.
Kind of explainer. And what this is this is written for a Mac, but it but Windows is there's some similarities. So adjust accordingly. And then the first thing is Olama. So just to kind of get a pulse on the room and get to know people here, because I only know Michael really. Who here has like an Olama or LLM Studio or some kind of local AI setup. If I could just get like thumbs up. Okay, cool. We got
No.
one. Okay, cool. One, no problem. Peter, is it curious, is it Olama or something else?
It's a llama.
All right. Okay, cool. So then that's perfect. That's what I have set up. LLM Studio, it allows you to download models similar to Olama and run them, but LLM Studio has some other terms and conditions that are a little bit more opaque. And so yeah, here's well, next what I'm gonna do now, and this is where I need to record some videos to do this, because as soon as I start showing the local AI, my machine is gonna slow down. And so yeah, what I'll do is I'm gonna actually now show how I'm gonna use local AI to understand what the setup is. What, like, the first question I'll ask is I pull up this page. It's cached for me locally. It says send this note to the prompt. So when I click, sorry, just to give you some context, on the right side, I've already installed the Copilot plugin. And that's the Copilot plugin that this guide walks you through. I'm gonna pause actually and just realize, like, how much demo, what time wise, how much do I want to talk? How much do we want to have open discussion, Q&A? Just want to do a quick check-in. I came a
Well,
little
we can
bit.
interrupt each. This is an informal group, so we can interrupt each other. We can ask questions along the way. So just do you.
Okay,
So,
cool.
just kind of share. We want to kind of see. I'm loving this so far. We want to see the overall end-to-end experience of what to expect. So one thing you might want to do is like show us what the output, what the end game is. Like, here's the experience of using your local AI, and then we can circle back. I'm like, then here's how I did it. That might be one approach.
Perfect.
But
So
in others, just chime in on the chat too if you want to ask questions of Brian as we're going through.
cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just ask a question like, hey, what are the requirements for this, the setup guide? And it's going to be running through my local Olama. It's oh wait. So I'm sending that to you right now, because right now this LLM is going to hallucinate. It's going to come up with, well, what are we talking about? What's the context here? It doesn't have the context, even though I have this note pulled up. And by the way, this is just an AI kind of experience, user experience kind of problem. How's my audio, by the way, now that it's running?
Good.
Can you guys step out? Sorry, I got some kids here as
No
well.
worries. No worries. All good.
So what it's saying, notice that it's the prerequisites. It's just giving some really general prerequisites. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this note to it. And what it does is it will basically load in the entire markdown file into the context of the LLM. And then, as expected, it will then be able to use that context for subsequent queries.
And again, the key,
and
again, the key is this is happening all locally on your machine. You're not going out to a public chat GPT or anything like that, somebody else's server.
Correct. Yes, correct. So let's see. Okay, I have this here. Boom. Okay, so what is done? So I sent this note. It says, please read the notes below. So it's reading this entire file right now. Great. Now that while it's reading that, what you'll see here is that it says first download a llama. Assume that you already have Obsidian, getting started with Obsidian set up. Slow local AI laggy demos. All right.
Oh, good.
And then and then what I'm using here is the Mistral model, as well as a Nomic embed text. And so if you're familiar with LLMs, there's the model itself for the text, but then there's also, you ideally want to take all the text and convert them into vectors at a vector database. So this basically has a built-in vector database. And then, and then when you're configuring it, and this is for anyone running Ollama, you need to actually, when you're starting Ollama, and Ollama gets a little funky, starting and stopping Ollama. I don't know what your experience has been, Peter, but it's like, it's designed as a service, and depending on how you start it is you stop it. And so I haven't seen any good canonical, like, how do you stop Ollama, except for, sometimes sport quitting. But you need to tell Ollama to be able to receive requests from app, / Obsidian. And if you don't, then it won't be able to communicate. And so, okay, great. So now it's read this file. So now I'm going to ask the same question again, because that's kind of the way to be more scientific about it, right? So remember when I asked oh shoot, did I do that? Okay. I asked the guide. I thought that it answered. I fed in the model. It didn't answer fully. Anyway, so we won't be able to do A/B testing like I was hoping. I apologize. But now that we have the guide fed in, now I can ask a question about it and it will respond. How do you guys know that this is local and not actually using ChatGPT behind the scenes? I'll show you the configuration. But once I finish going through this guide. So once you have like Minstrel installed and your Ollama set up, then you start the Ollama server and then configure Obsidian Copilot. And what I'll do now is I'll walk you through the Obsidian Copilot configuration that I have. And some of the main things are, you want to add Minstrel as your model name. Otherwise, it uses Llama 3, just because that's the default. And then you'll also want to set nomic embed text as well. And then I like to set my default to local. I can clearly use ChatGPT 4. I can use Claude 3. I can use Gemini Pro, assuming I have the API keys connected up. But I'm using Ollama. Peter.
Yeah, what's the difference between Minstrel versus Ollama 3?
So Minstrel is one that's free to use for commercial. Ollama 3, I don't know. I think Ollama 2 is not free for commercial. I haven't checked Ollama 3. So that's why I just default to free for commercial use models on demos. So, okay, cool. And then as you can see here, this is the Obsidian settings. I'm going into community plugins, then I'm going to Copilot. I already had this installed. It's from Logan Yang. He has it's open source. Well, yeah, let's just give him some some homage and respect. So yeah, this is open source AGPL 3 and so Logan is got some YouTube videos about this if you want to look at them as well, and you can also see kind of the process and the development that he's gone through in developing this, so that's kind of cool. And then, but I want to go now specifically to configure the settings. So what you'll see here now are my local AI setup settings. What is my default? Normally it's like GPT-3, I think, but I set it to, of course, Ollama local. You can also use LLM Studio local, but as I mentioned, I prefer Ollama. And you can, of course, now temperature, how creative you want it to be, how much conversations in the context window do you want to maintain? This is important for managing performance with usability and expected output, right? If you're expecting, if you need an investigation with a long context window, you may want to just change this, save it, and go back. Anyway, like I said, you can add a bunch of APIs for OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, Router, etc. This is where now we start to get into more of the tuning of it. And first, what is our embedding model? Because a good embedding model, I think I saw something that said that 80% of kind of the OpenAI's setups didn't really involve embeddings yet. So a lot of people still haven't gotten into embeddings. I don't know if you guys have discussed it, but vector
No, we have
database.
not. So what is an embedding model?
Okay, cool. So yeah. So an embedding is it's a similar word for a vector, but an embedding is basically when you take content, arbitrary content, and convert it into a vector of numbers. Why do you convert it into a vector of numbers? Because then you can do the math of eigenvalues and things like that to confirm, does this vector of numbers look similar to this vector of numbers, and therefore see in my database of content what is similar. And it specifically, it has to use vector to do that efficiently. And that's why it has to convert the content into a vector, put it in a vector database. And so embeddings and vectors are sort of synonymous.
And if you wouldn't mind, for those that may not, including me, like what when you say vector specifically, what does that mean? Just turning it into numbers?
Yeah. So vectors, and so specifically, yeah, for vectors, we're using now the mathematical term. So a vector is an array of numbers that, generally has kind of a direction, like a three-dimensional vector can be graphed on a three-dimensional space. So it's three numbers generally. Yeah.
Got it.
And
And so in that regard, you're turning like words into these three-dimensional numbers, and then the computer using the model is then able to make associations based on those the multidimensionality of those vectors.
Correct. There is another plugin. I don't have it set up to show, but it's called Smart Connect. But what it does is actually tells you percentage-wise what note is most related to your current note. And it does that automatically by comparing the vectors of your current note to the vectors of the other notes in content. So that's an example of how vectors are used. And and it's just so expensive if we don't convert it into a vector.
Yeah. And when you say expensive, you're not necessarily talking money, you're talking processing power, computation power.
Yeah, like code processing. It's like taking two arbitrary blobs of content and saying it's similar. Like lots of ways to do that. And so naturally what we have to do is, and I presume like Tinder does something like this, but it has to go through and index all the files and create sort of a cache or a vector database. And so you can configure that. There's some advanced settings around proxies I won't get into, but then for the Ollama setup, and this is important, well, if you want to set the default to something other than like, basically, yeah, this is where you choose now what Ollama model you're using. I'll show you here. So I'm just using, these are the models. I haven't even installed Ollama 3 yet because I had this set up before, but as you can see, Minstrel is a 4 GB model. And you generally want a model that can fit in your working memory. Otherwise, of course, swapping and things like that will cause exponentially longer amounts of time. So yeah, something like the Minstrel model, Mistral, I keep putting the end, is a solid one to start with. Okay, so that's the Copilot setup. That's the guide, the walkthrough. We asked it a question. It's finished a while ago. But now notice that what it's doing is it's giving me an answer very specific now to this text message, this message itself. A Mac OS system, basic knowledge. Anyway, so it's telling me what are the requirements of this, and it's not just telling me the requirements based on what is written, but it's extrapolating some things as well, which is pretty cool. So that's one, and then can of course provide suggest edits. I'm going to now.
Do you want it to be? Yeah.
I'm going to compare this to. I'm going to suggest edits locally first. And just see what it says, and then I'm going to ask ChatGPT-4 Turbo the same question, just so we can compare the outputs. That's mostly it's more of a Mistral to OpenAI comparison, because of now that we have the environment set up, now that we have the local data, and we know what the local data is, most of our now swapping out models and actually doing model testing is, well, it's a lot easier now with this kind of setup. And
when you're
That's-
feeding it, looks like you're feeding it a note. How would you feed it like a whole corpus of documents and notes, like a whole Obsidian file, or how does that
yeah,
work?
yeah. So in Obsidian, it's called a vault, and it just like VS Code, Visual Studio Code. Obsidian doesn't open up a file; it opens up a directory of markdown files that are interconnected. And so your question is, well, how does it work on multiple nodes, right?
Correct,
The
as opposed to
way,
one markdown file.
yeah. And so the way that it's done is you have to feed it each individual file for the most part. The
Okay.
vector database does enable uh, some querying support behind the scenes in order to be able to do that. But for the most part, like if you're trying to do precision type level stuff, then yes, saying, hey, I want you to take this template markdown file and actually try to, if my computer wasn't so laggy, I'd write it out. I don't want to mess it while it's crunching. Take this like template, take this content, and then output something based upon it. And so what you'll do is you have to reference both of those files based upon what's called wiki syntax, where you put two brackets around the document name, the mark the document name. And so that's kind of the way of doing it. It would just be so expensive because there's a limited context window in AI models. So try to like load the whole vault could be monster. It could be massive. Okay, so here's finally got some answers back. I'm gonna go ahead and ask the same thing of ChatGPT-4. Now what I'm curious about is ChatGPT-4 going to maintain the context of the file or not? I actually haven't done a test like this in the latest version. So I'm going to ask the same question, suggest edits to the document. I suspect it might be a little. We'll see. And then if not, I'll show you how to. Okay, cool. Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, what document is it, right? Because I was giving the local AI the context, but I wasn't. So then how do you reference a document directly? Well, this is the syntax in Obsidian. And so now the thing to be aware of now is that it's going to send this entire file to OpenAI. And notice how much faster it was too. Anyway, pretty much instantly replied with, at least, I mean, Mistral provided about 10 suggestions. They proposed some clear order on how to do it. And then what you could do is you could say something like, take the feedback from, and now notice I did an open dash. It's now telling me what file. Well, maybe it's my note file from yesterday. Take my feedback from this and apply this. So if someone sends you suggestions on how to edit this document, I could just reference, assuming that, I can reference it here, I can reference someone's suggestions and apply it to this and, apply to this setup local AI llama and rewrite it. Now, I'm not gonna do this right now because I don't actually have it, but I'm showing you how you can work on a corpus of documents. But rather than just working on a unordered corpus of documents, it's so valuable to give it some kind of context and a prior relationship or ontology from one document to another. Now, the problem is all of our software is designed to kind of hide the ontology behind the database and behind all this other stuff. And you're just a user and it puts us in this user box. This sort of, and now from AI, we have to kind of unravel that. And so to be able to work on a corpus of documents, you really need a kind of, I mean, I'm sort of an ontologist, and so this is where I've come to. Hammers looking for nails to pound in. But yeah, creating a kind of an ontology of what that document, what that repository, what that vault looks like is so helpful for these interrelated documents to start to make more sense to not just the AI, but the humans prompting it. So yeah, that's an example on that use case. I'm going to go back to a llama local. Well, I'll just keep it GP4 in case I ask something that logs it. Great. What other kind of questions? Is there some directions that we want to go? I've sort of just done some basic, showed the local AI setup, how it's set up, done a few tests. David.
Mentioned ontology. Is there anything like some kind of drag and drop tool? I have a document or a collection of documents, and I can drag and drop those onto a magical tool that extracts the previously non-existent or the invisible ontology. As far as I know, ontology.
Yeah, it's such a I don't know of any good tools because an ontology is it really, the question is, where are you starting from? Are you assuming the world? Are you assuming a new user that knows nothing? Like it's
I would what concern the greater context of where I'm coming from is my generation is leaving, and the knowledge of the systems is embedded in the people that are leaving, and so I'm trying to work on the mindset of, okay, I'm a summer intern assigned to a spreadsheet or a project or a program. Can I drop that spreadsheet, that program onto some kind of magical utility that will auto-magically extract this mythical ontology?
yeah. Yeah.
The level I've been watching this for a long time. The level of where ontology work is done is so far above the need of the summer intern who needs to, or the new hire, take your pick. How do I understand this body of knowledge? It's just been dropped in my lap and the boss walked away.
Yeah. So, discoverability of knowledge management. That is, that's
okay. Don't answer. I mean, obviously, I'm leading the witness, and you've given me the right answer. There's still way out over the tips of our skis.
Yes.
Okay.
What I can tell you is, I was just talking to I do website design because to me I'm trying to bring AI into websites on a local deployable way as well. And so I've taken on some clients that I want to learn and integrate with. So I've been redesigning the spa client, and it's she's got a mess of services and 100 of different, things going on. Where do I start with her ontology? And really, again, and this explains a little bit of my bias. I started building websites as a teenager, and so I'm in my 30s now, late 30s. But as a teenager, I guess I started thinking about non-linear documents. So, where do you start on the ontology? This is a graph view in Obsidian of showing how all the notes are linked to each other, and you can start to see.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, so
right.
Tinderbox, I presume is something like this, and
Michael, Tinderbox can do the same thing, right? Pretty much, I think. Michael.
Yeah, similar but different.
Yeah, so there's some.
Yeah, it's basically how is A connected to B and B connected? I had no idea that A, B, C, D, E, Z. I need something to bite me, then tell me that Z is connected to A. And so these kind of diagrams are impressive,
but
what do I do with them?
Yeah, and it depends on the goal. you know, my background is I'm a solutions architect. I guess I could show my, actually, let me just pull that up briefly. I think I shared this, but I can drop it again if it failed like my last link. But here's my local kind of my AI resume. And so what I have here is, unfortunately, I put my resume into Markdown format, and then I had to load it all as a file into this cloud AI tool that I'm using. And so, and then I embedded, you can see here that I've embedded this from Pickaxe project, which is just a simple kind of AI wrapper that allows me to import some stuff. And so, yeah, so this is how I'm doing my AI. And unfortunately, yeah, there's not a good way to like interface it with others, but you can ask questions of like, well, what?
Yeah, I mean, I'm wrestling with the challenge of how do you take the lingua franca of management, Excel, and convert it into something that is more accurately documented, since Excel is basically non-documented.
It's such a, yeah, or Google spreadsheet even. It's just a little better.
Yeah, I mean,
But yeah,
yeah,
no, spreadsheets is what the business world runs on. I wish that there were some better markdown spreadsheet formats. That is it's a problem that I see coming, that's actually being solved within the next, year or so, to be honest. Obsidian's
from where? Please enlighten me. I mean, I see the problem expanding at an accelerating pace, and our ability to understand which tool, which hammer or screwdriver to apply at the right time is completely crippled by the level of AI hype.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, let me answer your question in a different way then. Here's how because as a solutions architect, I'd go into a corporation and they're all looking at different pages. They're on different teams. I have no idea like where they're coming from, but we have to get multiple stakeholders, including.
First off, let me ask, what is the meaning? What is the meaning of that phrase, that term that you use, solution architect?
Okay, fair enough. I'll start there. So, solutions architect, generally it's like a field
Business
engineer,
analyst? A business analyst?
someone who works with the client to understand their business problems, who understands the tech and understands the enterprise software on how to guide them and even hold their hands or even doing it, implementing it for them.
How about extract from them? I mean, you say you're working with a spa, relatively simple model, I think, simple business, I hope.
I don't even describe
and
an architect to them.
and they don't know I mean, you got to hold them down and put your boot on their neck to extract what their problem is.
Yes.
They can run their business relatively successfully, but to get them to articulate, first I want to start here, and then I get to move there, and then I move here. I mean, that is really, really, really hard.
Yeah.
So, Brian, a couple questions. Can you go?
Yeah.
Can you go back to that point you were making about multiple people within a team and connecting the dots, and I'm kind of curious too, like how are you constructing your resume here? Like you have information in your resume as an Obsidian note, it appears, and how is that working?
Yeah. So what I've done is, I mean, this is my resume from just Markdown. It's in a Markdown format, but with a little bit of HTML formatting, and this is what ShareNote does, is it kind of renders it nicely. And so what I did is I exported this Markdown file. I uploaded it into this Pickaxe Cloud AI. And then I said, look, Pickaxe, use this to answer questions based on this way. And then, of course, I prompted engineered it some. And then what this is doing is that it's a local file that's rendering, well, this is not local from this view, but it's a local file that's rendering Pickaxe as an actual iframe.
Got it. And what's pickaxe? Do you have a URL you can share with us? I'm not familiar with
Yeah,
that.
yeah, no, this is just a kind of an easy, cheap tool for quickly building little bots in the cloud.
All right.
Let me add that here.
Awesome. Hey, Chuck and Tom, you're notoriously quiet. What's your reaction to the conversation we're having, and how would you like to guide us to the next stages of today's conversation?
While they're thinking that, I do want to try to finish answering David's question. I know it's a tricky question, but I do want to say that what I try to do to get everyone aligned is a website is sort of the amalgamation point of a business usually, unless it's like enterprise or, secret proprietary, military, blah, blah, blah. And so what I try to do is I just say, look, for every vault, for every knowledge base, we need an about. And what does this include? Well, this should include your homepage that provides some routing to other things. It should include a summary, or what is this knowledge base about? What is it for human AI? So basically an about page in directory where you can put about information. A blog, the blog is sort of unnecessary, but then a directory. And a directory is where we put structured data. Like in this case, people are structured, guides are structured, calendars and agreements are structured in this particular ontology. And then for unstructured things, we put the rest into notes. Why? Well, because everything's a node and we could call it something else, but we just put it in notes so it keeps things clean. And then now it allows for everyone to get clearly aligned on structured information goes under directory, unstructured goes into notes. The about gets us started on where, and I can publish this actually like a website and people can intuitively navigate it like a website. The other thing to be aware of about Obsidian, and this is a plugin called, this is a community plugin called Tasks. And what it allows is it basically turns the markdown tag, I'll just open up today's. So I just open up today's notes using the key command. And then what I can do is I can say 10 a.m. Tinderbox demo. This is a public vault I'm using. And this plugin itself, what it does is that actually down in the bottom left, it like includes it there. If I press space, I can set a due date tomorrow. And notice that it's not setting the project management information in some database. It's actually using syntax, that format, to create a sort of project management language or ontology. I can later on, I can query anything. And this is where it gets really powerful if you guys are, if you guys are SQL data scientists, etc. But from within data query, I can start to query tasks and lists and, well, let's just say everything that's tagged with, call it, everything tagged with a, call it guide. That's one. Okay. Okay, so I just wrote this block query, and what it did, and this is now more of an Obsidian feature, but you can start to see how if AI understood data, data view is the name of the plugin, then it would work. I can arbitrarily write queries to query all the other text files and things like that, and then using tasks, I can even say, hey, anything that is not complete yet. You notice when I click complete, it added a completion date. Anything that's not complete, that is assigned to so-and-so or tagged with Bry. The reason I'm showing this is because where I want to get is I want my AI to be able to read and understand the status of my projects and, and actually be able to start to interact with me on a kind of a project management level. And I don't have a demo for it today, but I'm showing some of the building blocks that I think can help us get there. And so so then going back to your question, David, I don't believe in like this universal ontology. I believe in minimal ontology, starting off within that domain and then unfolding and expanding as they ask questions, really. Or as you know, you need to organize that information for them in the future when they ask questions. So that's my somewhat short answer to your question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? And another things, and this comes from more of my SIGINT background, but like, there's an open map plugin, so I can keep all my geolocations here. I don't have any in this particular Volt. What's cool is I can run multiple Volts at the same time and complete them and keep them completely separate. And then the other thing to be aware of is that the Obsidian Volt is, well, let's just go to Reveal and Finder. And then show. Okay, so now I'm showing my hidden things. Notice that there's this Obsidian directory. This is what stores all the plugins and all these things. So if I send someone this Obsidian Volt with the setup, it will generally work. And so now it allows for us to create self-contained AI workflows with Obsidian. Check.
Okay, I guess I'm just trying to queue up a question. But one of the things that I found interesting is you've been going back and forth between the local version of an AI service and cloud services.
Mhm.
And so you've clearly got a bias toward wanting to use the local, but you've also demonstrated the disadvantage, which is enormous processing load. Where do you I guess I'm interested in your thoughts on how much is the local mode of operation imperiled by the demand for processing resources that are often not available locally or not available in sufficient quantity, and where does that fit into your thinking about how to use these tools, and how important is it that you maintain both local and access to the fast, quick cloud-based service?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So I'll give you a use case. I'm working with this guy who's went to med school, spent years. Actually, no, you probably Michael, do you know Adrian Gropper? Anyway, he goes to the IIW twice a year. It's a great unconference event. And
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, I know Adrian quite well.
yeah, cool. So anyway, Adrian, I helped him get set up with this local AI, and because what he's desperately looking at is how do we create standards by which doctors, not hospital administrators, but doctors and patients both have basically AI access. And then that points to a pattern for portable medical records, because if the patient gives consent to this AI, et cetera. So and what he's really looking at is, look, he doesn't want everyone's medical records going into the cloud, right? The cloud is just someone else's computer. Here on my local machine, I have a closed system of information. If I turn off the internet, I could actually do somewhat of like an air-gapped analysis where, man, anyway, I don't know what security background anyone's comes from, but like, data leaks are just, dude, our computers are so infected with cloud software. Like, we don't even know where our data's going. And with OpenAI, we know it's going to the cloud, of course. So here's the trade-off. For speed, for some things, for tests, for things like that, like cloud AI is not going anywhere. In fact, there are really interesting emergent characteristics that the more data and the more compute you get behind generating these LLMs, you'll get not just incremental, but orders of magnitude changes in behavior. An example of this is what they found is in developing some of these, ChatGPT 4 models, one AI researcher I listened to explained that these models have to develop a theory of mind about how people have goals and narratives, and in order to be able to complete narratives and things like that. But that theory of mind doesn't emerge until they get sufficient amount of data in it. So, so yeah, the way I see it is that it's kind of a pay for privacy world is what it's going to go towards. Hey, if you want me to go slower, if you want me to make sure I have limited data leaks, and if you want me to do this analysis according to the quality of these models, this is what I'm capable of. If you want security, then this is what's sort of required. If you don't care about that, then, well, there's the cloud and it's faster for me anyway. So it's, it's a trade-off.
And your
So,
point of pay for privacy is, you might have to buy some local hardware and, have an extra computer in addition to your laptop or whatever to be able to have that privacy.
correct. And like, just on this analysis alone, it would take me 10 times long. And look, if I if I quit things and if I loaded everything into memory and if I optimized it for the workflow, I could do it faster. But based on this benchmark, it would take me 10 times longer to use the local AI because I'm waiting, twiddling my thumbs. And so it's the human time as well. But yeah.
What kind of setup do you have, and are you lusting after the next big piece of hardware, or are you satisfied that what you have right now is adequate?
Yeah, so I've got a 16 gigabyte Apple M1, 2020 MacBook Pro. So yeah, the 16 gigabytes of memory is generally pretty important. And
But if you had a new M3 with 128 gigabytes of memory, you'd be smoking.
right. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and what I like, where I think I would want to go is probably because what I don't like, I believe in we live in a multi-device, we live in a multi-identity context. And so what I would prefer to have is one server that I can host the models on and do the compute, but then, and then basically route it to my own local, not my local machine, but my own server AI. I think that's where I would prefer to go and make that beefy so that I don't need to carry around a beefy MacBook. Tom?
Thank you, Bri. I'm a physician as well. Just wanted to chime in that this local model is hugely important in healthcare because of the privacy issue. There's obviously big concerns about HPI and privacy of patients. And so I will reiterate that that's at the top of the list in terms of being able to use these models. And of course, the trade-off is accuracy. The trade-off is also going to be consumption time, which is kind of why these models and AI in healthcare is kind of starting off more on the automation side, because you have a bigger chance of error, so we can try things out. And so, for example, in getting referrals done, and there's less of the privacy issue, less of the ability to make an error in a diagnosis or something like that. So they're using them more on the administration side, just to be able to lower the burden that these clinicians have and all the administrative tasks. Doing referrals, doing coding is another big area. Summarizing charts is a big one, because these are novels that are now people that are very sick. You generally have so many documents in unstructured PDFs that literally could be hundreds of pages, and being able to summarize that in a very efficient manner, at least to get a starting point. It's not always accurate, but at least to get a starting point is better than what we've had in the past. So I'll just stop there and just wanted to reiterate the point that you made, that these local models is something hugely important for physicians in healthcare.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, thank you, Tom. And yeah, would love to connect with you more in the future on what, kind of what you're seeing, because I've done some nationwide unredacted healthcare research. in some interesting, not under constitutional domain contexts. Otherwise that wouldn't fly. He couldn't do that. But no, so I'm very sensitive to kind of the healthcare record and how our current tech infrastructure is, and some of the entity. I mean, that's why I go to IIW, Internet Identity Workshop, is because yeah, there's some known problems that we're solving, and I agree that focusing on operations rather than medical diagnosis is sort of how to get the foot in the door. But yeah, yeah, thanks for that comments. David, did you have another comment, or I could
Don't get me going down the risks, the challenges of information rattling around the medical profession. They're so siloed, and the language is so obfuscated that it's a real challenge. At your age, I mean, hopefully we will have paved the way to make it okay for you. But at my age, it's pretty damn scary.
Yeah, I'm going through a divorce right now, and what I've learned is that if my co-parent is unwilling to share records with me, what do I have? Like, what have I got? Like, anyway, so that's been, and then there's medical records, there's healthcare records, privacy for children. Anyway, it blew up my privacy hat. Michael, and then Chuck.
Sorry, I'm in a Starbucks or in a Pete's. It's a little noisy. If I wanted to feed into your model, or in what you're showing us here, say my dissertation in the form of a Word doc or a PDF file, is there a way to, or feed in an image? Is there a way to feed a local file into this, or does it all have to be marked down, or how does one work with that?
Yeah, great. I'll answer that also by actually pointing out one of the biggest problems in this local AI POC, proof of concept, that I'm doing with Adrian. And that is, right now, all these formats are defined in JSON. All the standards are in JSON. FHIR, for example, is a big format for the healthcare industry. But the problem with the JSON is it's redundant. There's a lot of, like, Markdown uses white space and convention where, JSON uses delimiters, but there's also just so much redundancy. As an AI, I want to use as few tokens as possible, because the fewer tokens I use, the faster I'm going to run, and the more I can put in there, and therefore the smarter I can make it. And right now, Markdown beats out all these proprietary hidden syntax type formats just from a kind of a model input efficiency.
Well,
But
and to that point, if you opened up a Microsoft Word document and actually looked at the code, it's an unintelligible hog, right?
exactly,
That's the point. Yeah.
we do that on purpose, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
And so,
Got it.
Yeah, to run it through this system, you'd have to convert it into Markdown. The conversion between JSON and Markdown, or just regular text to Markdown, that is absolutely an area of growth and improvement, and I see new kind of ways and models to do it every day, but there's not a one-to-one mapping and how to do that. And so, yeah.
Well, Peter just raised a good point though in the chat, where you could use an engine like Pandoc and take a Word document and go, Pandoc to Markdown, and have Pandoc can put the doc.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a I don't know if I have it installed. Okay, yeah, I do have it installed. But yeah, there's a Pandoc plugin for Obsidian. Chuck.
Okay, I wanted to make an observation, and then I'd like to kind of get your reaction to it as a person with some direct expertise. As I'm looking at all the things going on with AI these days, and all the various claims and counterclaims and opinions being tossed around, it occurs to me that this does have some parallels with things that we've seen in the past. So if I think to my earlier years and VisiCalc in the early 1980s, LandPark for David and the mainframe world, which would have been taken back a few more years. One of the things that became, clear, first technology through the period of hyping and then disillusionment and then reaching some equilibrium. But the equilibrium was always a bit unstable for the simple reason that spreadsheets were unstable. They're extremely error prone. And trying to get errors out of spreadsheets turns out to be a problem that, as far as I'm concerned, was never solved. But the other thing that's interesting is spreadsheets became very powerful when a single person used them because they became very familiar with how they did things. But in enterprise context or any kind of team context, you had spreadsheets becoming that other people kept reading, and you got a mindset around a certain body of not just data, but approaches to manipulating the data that I think became biases. And you saw that in various places. You could see it in research areas. You could see it, a field of research. You could see it in the way that financial firms approached analyzing markets and developing new trading strategies and things like that. And my impression is that that's going to be a characteristic we're going to see for a long time with AI. And I again wonder if AI isn't going down the path of reaching an equilibrium that will be unstable, in that we're going to see an individual, perhaps with a local AI system, able to put something together that works for them. But as we start getting out into a larger context, more people engaged with it, that we're going to find that I hate the term hallucinations, but the tendency to go the rails that and shares with human beings, and the tendency to pull together a whole body of team perspectives that becomes its own bias is going to be a problem that will plague AI for the rest of the period that AI is a technically viable solution. I just wondered if you could comment on that observation, either in the sense of I'm way off base, or do you observe the same kinds of potential concerns?
Yeah, no, I think that I think that Conway's law sort of explains that a little. I don't know if you guys have come across Conway's law. I'm just gonna probably heard it in one form, but it's basically, an organization that designs systems, they're constrained to produce systems that copy the communication structures that design them.
Mm-hmm.
Front end and back end engine, teams. Where's the code base divided? Front end and back end, right? Wait, what? And then what? Like an API layer to get, then what? The connection between front end and back end is the complexity point by which people start tripping on each other and stuff. And so yeah, cutting the apple properly matters. Spreadsheets. I grew up on an island in a territory of the U.S. And so then I did some work in a non-individualistic culture. This healthcare work I mentioned, it was in a country that is tribal. It's sort of in the Middle East, and like they don't think that, oh, every person is responsible for themselves. So if you smoke, you die, and that's your problem, or blah blah blah. And so they were looking at healthcare as a community challenge and collectively. And I think that's a similar problem with AI, is that the simple versions are free. Why? Because the peer-to-peer, the one-to-one, the human to AI isn't the hard part. The hard part is when you get two humans now interacting with the same AI. Which human's in control? Who knows what prompt? Who gets to rewrite the prompt, or canonize the inputs, or or what is the blockchain version of the inputs that are immutable, right? Like there's a lot of questions that we have not answered on a peer-to-peer human kind of shared ledger perspective that makes it challenging. I mean, this is one reason I spent the last about 2 years working with a licensing and patent attorney, because we've done user licenses and, end user licenses, and all of our tech is designed around dividing everyone up into a unit user. And then what do we have to do? Oh, just here's an email recovery. How do we implement security on a individual user perspective? Let someone else worry about that. Like the recovery, the data redundancy, like those are, and so anyway, I point to those things because it is very much a paradigm. It is very much a problem. Like we're going to see best in class products take off in the very simple AI context that are going to dominate on the consumer market. But those are not the right formulations or products. Like ChatGPT itself, Sam Altman admits, is naive and overly simplistic and sort of embarrassing. But they have to simplify and dumb it down so much so that the mystery and the myth and the scariness of trusting something you don't understand is, I think, less overwhelming. I don't know. Did that answer it somewhat?
Yeah, no, I didn't think it's a question that, or it wasn't posed as a question that has an absolute answer.
Yeah, no, it's a great
I
question.
really appreciated your insights. That was just useful input to me, so I thank you.
Cool. Yeah, Tom.
Brian, just real quickly, I see a big value in terms of using these local AI systems, especially with Obsidian, more in clustering and or thematic analysis, or being able to just identify these as your knowledge base gets bigger and bigger and bigger, being able to just identify these relationships within these clusters. Are you using it for that in that way?
No cluster analysis right now. What so let me, and the reason for it is this. What I'm looking at is I want to get to the first principles of authentic data capture. Right now, we've mastered institutional data capture, which is, well, we can't trust anything that comes from you. By the way, this is how our legal system works. If it comes from a witness, then it's more credible because you're the one on trial. But you submit it, it has to be sort of verified. It has to go through proper gatekeeping and Q&A before it's a valid institutional data. But what I want to get to is a world where I have my own healthcare notebook, where I take notes of what I ate. And no one else needs to need that. And the only time my doctor needs to know that is when I go to the doctor and maybe connect up my data and AI with his doctor. I mean, look, I'm projecting a world that doesn't exist, of course. But once I start to instrument out and can verify and can trust my local data is authentic because I know it came from me and I know no one manipulated it. Now I can start to develop, an authentic local model that, scientifically I've seen, I've touched, I know how it works. And then from there, I can start to do, well, now the tricky thing is, well, if I've captured data in this way and I want to do cluster analysis with other people in my family that have a similar genetic profile, how would I do that? And this is a case I've actually talked with about someone recently, and of course you need to have, scientifically you need to have similar input methods and things like that. And so it suddenly becomes a tricky problem when you let people, users, edit their own healthcare records. And right now our healthcare system is designed so that, and our legal system is designed so that lawyers are in control of the docket, doctors are in control of the legal healthcare record, and people are not in control of their own data institutionally.
Well, and to add to that, there's an interesting case as well in that if you have a pacemaker, you actually don't have legal ownership of your heart rhythm. The pacemaker company does, and you're not allowed. You can't legally gain access to that rhythm data because they say that's our proprietary algorithm, and basically your heart data is ours.
See, it's like, yeah. So yeah, to me, data capture and data canonizing is sort of the first step before we start to get better cluster analysis. Otherwise, you have to pay some hospital administrator and some pharmaceutical company who's done it in their way. And I don't know if that's authentic data capture. Did it answer your question, Tom, or touch on it in an interesting way?
Yeah, wasn't really talking more about the healthcare. I was just talking about your own notes, and that's really that's how I use Obsidian. It's just really non-confidential. I mean, just my own thoughts, my own notes, almost as a pre-bucket for further analysis. So I really use it more in terms of just trying to get those scratch notes or those notes that I want to develop more. And just that's the way I use it. And I don't really, I put all my other data that's a lot more sensitive. They're in obviously very secure places, but I use it Obsidian really primarily for my own thoughts. So I was just wondering, in that way, one of the first steps is just to try to capture these topics and themes, and from these notes, what do they mean? Let me go into this cluster a little bit more. So that's where this question really originated from.
Got it. Yeah, so you're probably familiar with like maps of content and different ways of kind of, or and I really like this, the idea. Milo is a Obsidian guy that he's a note taker. He talks about, look, the problem is we've been doing much note taking, and we need to start note making. Like, who am I taking notes for? Someone else? I want to make notes and then once you start making notes in a way for you and those that you care about, then it's a different paradigm, and you start to cluster and you want to link things more and create more canonized views. But you did mention on sensitivity levels. I have been using Obsidian for some sensitive use cases, and actually Obsidian Sync has its AES 256, I think, encrypted and kind of synchronizing of the entire vault. And so and then when you would just apply some confidentiality terms or privileged communication, I mean, Obsidian feels more secure to me than Gmail. So and doctors and lawyers trust all their information in Gmail. So that's where, as long as it's tagged properly, yeah, anyway, that's how I kind of look at that. And then it also creates different kind of clustering. So what you'll notice, going back to my my graph here, is that one of the biggest notes that you see here is the WikiWeek confidants. And it's because the WikiWeek confidants is it's a page that basically explains the duties of confidentiality and the MNDA in a hopefully better than legalese way. But of course, it's linked to a bunch of things that are then confidential in the space. So this is a mixed confidential, non-confidential vault.
Okay. Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. We're at top of time, but if you don't mind, let's go another 15 minutes or so. I don't want this to end. It's pretty awesome. But Bruce, you got a
Cool.
question?
All right. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Bruce.
Oh, that's fine. No. This is fascinating. I know we're right at the end. I guess I have two thoughts. And the thought I began having, Brian, first of all, this is so enjoyable to watch. But as you're there creating, I don't know, what I'm going to call SimBri, which is, your resume. And to me, the only place it can go is that there's a holographic representation of you, and you're sitting in an easy chair and you're having conversations with people. And as a psychologist, I wonder, okay, when people call me and they want to seek my services, they want to know if they can trust me. They want to know, my competence and things like that. And I really do wonder about the level of confidence that individuals have when they access AI systems, as opposed to when they access the person with the AI system. And so it almost seems to me that it's the entire field, and what do I know, is headed in the wrong direction, that it should actually be as dissimilar as possible when you're consulting AI information, as opposed to consulting the person who might be guiding it. And I guess I'm wondering your thoughts about that.
Yeah, to me, that speaks to, why do we trust what we trust? You're talking about confidence in an individual, credibility, and things like that. And And you said you're psychologist background, clinician, researcher.
Psychologist.
Sorry, say that again.
I'm a clinical psychologist, so diagnose and treat.
Okay, cool. And so yeah, like, you're giving recommendations to someone, and the matter of how much they believe in it, trust in it, also impacts whether they like take it, act on it, right? And if they don't act on it, it's not helpful advice. But yeah, no, there's two branches of thoughts here. And one is we need to meet people where they're at. And right now, if they trust a Facebook-like interface, then that's, I mean, they're used to algorithms giving them things. And so, meeting people where they're at. Now, does that mean in every context? No, they're not dealing with the Facebook interface in a doctor clinic or a therapist group. And so these niches that haven't fully been digitized are, how do we build trust, and how do we create the right user experience for it?
But you bring up, of course, where this is all headed, which is if you think about HIPAA and Circle of Trust and the notion that there are certain standards, Facebook and all these others, I can't say they're violating the standards because there's usually disclaimers, but people believe them as though it's coming from the genuine source. And I can't tell you how many times someone will come in confident of their diagnosis because they found it on TikTok or somewhere else, and ignoring certain clinician 101 factors. And so then there's a whole re-education process, and sometimes I lose out to Facebook.
Yep. Yeah, so I don't,
Solve it.
yeah, creating an interface for trust is, I don't know. I'd love to find out how to do that. But in the meantime, it's, and this speaks a little bit to my kind of, I guess, private intel background, that I've distanced myself from. But that is, especially when you get into like, how do we put it? Once you get into, population level type data manipulation, on like news and facts and things like that, deep fakes is already proven to be a thing, right? And yeah, I think that we're going to see a lot more abuses, and we're going to see major spotlighted problems around AI that's going to push regulation, and it's going to push it towards more centralized control. And my hope, my genuine hope in that is that we can learn to trust humans and trust each other more than we trust blind institutions or bureaucracies that we can't talk to and can't negotiate with. And I think that's actually what this AI thing is going to create, is that people are going to get burned over and over again from false information until they stop, anyway, it's going to be interesting. Other questions?
But that does raise a question of scale, right? When you have so many billions of people on the planet, and they talk about the fact that our mind can handle 150 relationships, and because that's how we evolved from our tribe, and when we start getting beyond that, it gets really challenging. So, and trust is a process that's built over time through interactions. So when I just meet you on the street, how can I trust you when I have no history with you? And so one thing I've been, you talked earlier about authentic data. One of the things that's been toying around in our industry is there a way to create like this authentic reputation score that somehow gets built out from our behaviors and from our own data usage? And I don't want to go as far as like the Chinese social credit scoring system, but how do we kind of find this way of having a decentralized, personalized reputation, authentic reputation token that we can be carrying with us?
Actually, it's interesting, Bri, you used a concept that I was surprised to hear. You mentioned theory of mind. And I didn't know if you were referring to theory of mind the same way I understand it as a mental health provider, because that's an extremely popular term in the area of autism. And that's that whole business of social pragmatics and an awareness of what someone else's thoughts, feelings, et cetera, their biases, et cetera, and you take that into account in your communication patterns. It strikes me that that is potentially an area for AI, that as one AI is aware of, that it's able to reach out to other sources of information and kind of, whether it's a probability score or a conflict score or a something, it strikes me that that is a piece of things rather than just having these independent, AI heads, spouting information.
Yeah, I yeah, to touch on I think both of your questions in a way, like, I think in some ways a police badge communicates a theory of mind. You would expect a police officer to ask certain questions, not ask certain questions, like, sorry, none of your business, I have the right to, like, there's certain regulated theories of mind, in some ways that are around like a badge. And in theory, that then communicates trust. If someone's got a medical license or a legal license, right, that somewhat changes kind of the theory of mind of how you might approach someone, relate to them, trust them or not trust them. And
Well,
and that also speaks to the reputation of like, well, what if this person cheated in med school, or this cop is being investigated actively, right? Like, and so then, yeah, the reputation around people and AI is it's a massive, I think it's going to be an area of more and more research. Unfortunately, the climate in the US has caused all of our closed algorithms and scores to be private. And then there's also some of the myth around, universal tracking systems that, and appreciation for privacy constitutionally in America. So yeah, there's some interest. I suspect that collectivist cultures are gonna, like China, like has made incredible progress, WeChat, not saying it's an example of privacy by any means, but they've integrated most of their economy around stuff like that. And that's going to allow them to move faster in adopting some of this mega AI stuff. Whereas in the US, we're going to stay fragmented for a lot longer, and it's going to be a slower grind for people to trust similar things again.
I think an important aspect of trust too is, and you kind of touched on this earlier, in that we trust that people are honest, have integrity, are authentic, that they don't intend to hurt us, that there's some benevolence in their intention, or at least their intention is transparent. But also, if they do hurt us, they will take appropriate remedial action, in some way, shape, or form. And if they don't, there are systems in place that will force them to do so. Like in the cop example, right? We trust the badge, and we know if the badge goes rogue, there's a system that will, remediate the harm that we may, or mitigate the harm that we may have experienced. And when you have the corporate closed box system running these systems, and you can't even call anybody for support, there is no remediation, there is no support system there. And I think that's something we have to figure out and weave in. What's your thought or reaction on that?
Yeah, to me, yeah, my thought is that there needs to be more transparency around how these badges, like police badges, I mean, these are incredible. Like, this is the privilege to hurt someone in certain situations, sort of, right? And so I think there needs to be I believe in Clay Christensen's theory of disruptive innovation. Rarely does game-changing innovation happen within the system itself. It usually has to happen without, and then it cannibalizes the system, and it usually comes from someone who knows the system inside and then goes out. And anyway, but yeah, being able to create revocable badges, and we have all these infinite, forever, not, kind of open source licenses. We design things to last forever, but the reality is, and I think for us to get to the right digital landscape, we need to get serious about talking about revocability, transferability, like how does a relationship end, and what matter, how does data get redacted or data get destroyed. Here's an example of an NDA. Let me actually open this up so you can see it. So in these duties of confidentiality, like, look, this is sort of, most NDAs are like, oh, you know, take no less care than reasonable care. So they're generally written to be ambiguous. This particular one says, oh, by the way, if it's marked with encrypted by default, then only use encrypted by default platform. So that way, you know that it's in encrypted default platform. And so you can kind of share it under encrypted by default. Does that create more trust when you see that data or things have been handled in a secure way? I don't know, but then if I trust you with some information, but you have a bad reputation or you've been leaked, like you know, all these institutional scores and things like that, I think, and this is I'll end on this, or unless there's any questions, I think they need to now be applied on an individual and collective level, not an institutional level, because people are the only conduits of information that we have, not institutions. Institutions are made up of people. And for us to be able to do that, like, we need to be able to negotiate domain specific reputations better than we've ever done before.
Yeah, and then on that note, I'm assuming you've heard of GLIFE, the Global Legal Identifier Foundation.
Yep.
Right, and for those that may not be aware of it, glyph.org. Coming out of the financial crisis in 2008, the G30, G20 financial institutions globally mandated the creation of GLIFE, which meant that every banking institution and financial institution would have to get what's called a legal entity identifier, or a LEID. And that is now regulatorily mandated, like 300 regulations throughout the world in the financial world, and now rolling out to nearly every entity, in that they have to have this legal entity identifier so that we can actually find them. And just about 8-9 months ago, they started rolling out, or about a year ago actually, but yeah, in all practicality, 8-9 months ago, they started rolling out what's called a VLEI, or a Verified Legal Entity Identifier. So now that legal entity identifier is just no longer just this long string of numbers. It is now a cryptographically verifiable credential, or digital credential, that can then be carried with the organization. And what happens is when an organization, and the one company that's now issuing the VLEIs is a company called Provident out of Baltimore. And what happens is, and there are about 15, 20 others that will be issuing them soon as well. But what happens is, when an organization gets a VLEI, it then can now turn around and start issuing VLEIs to their employees, to their call centers, to their agents. And so ultimately what's going to end up happening is, you will, and to your point of revocability, let's say I'm an Amazon delivery person, Amazon can issue to me, through the various proxies and subcontractors that it works for, that VLEI says that I am a verified Amazon delivery person. You don't need to know my name. You don't need to know who I am. You don't need to know my age. I can present to you this VLEI, and because of my biometrics and how it's tied to me, I now can have, cryptographically represented and delegated authority as a representative of Amazon. And it's saying, and that credential can also include, what authority do I have? Like, I have the authority to open up your garage and put put a package in your garage. Or similarly, the CEO of a company could be, I have a VLEI that represents me as the CEO of this company, which means then I have the authority, as bestowed by the board, to be able to write checks up to such and such value. You don't need to know my name. You don't need to know anything else about me, other than the fact that I have the verifiable authority to be able to do or say X. And at which point that VLEI can be revoked immediately. And so if I'm the CEO today, can write a check for $1 million, board fires me, within 2 minutes, 30 seconds, I no longer have that authority, and no longer can represent myself that way. And so that whole VLEI verified credentialing model is rolling out very, very rapidly throughout the world. So within the next 18, 24, 36 months, you're going to start seeing that. And particularly in Europe, who just passed the EI-2.0 regulations about at the end of February. Within the next 24 months, every European member state will be obligated to roll out a digital wallet to every EU member citizen, which will give them similar verified type credential or digital credentials so that they can assert claims about themselves and their identities, and then be able to what's called do selective disclosure. So, for example, I walk into a bar, I don't need to pull out my driver's license anymore and prove that I'm over 21, and you can see all of my information. I can just present you this credential, and on my phone, and we'll say, "Are you over 21?" And the answer that comes back is yes, because that's all that anybody else needs to really know in that context. And so these are the kinds of things that will be coming out in very short order.
And trusting the verifier is also like, you know, this trust problem is a challenge. It's like, you know, but Glyph, by the way, has like 25 pages of identity proofing, you know, requirements. And so it's like, you know, it's not you trust the publicly traded company, you trust that someone is auditing it according to these standards. And
Correct.
I think that's kind of the world that we're in, and that's the world we're moving towards. But now we have to take these institutionally expensive processes like audit or verifying an identity. And well, to me, it's about, you know, I'm interested in decentralization and a internet that works for people more. And so it's,
Well,
you know.
And again, the question is, how do you do it at scale? Like, you know, getting a VOI, you know, starts at about $100 and takes a week or two, right?
Yeah,
You can't do that for a billion people, right? You know, or in the context of what's happening now, everyone's going to start hearing this in September or October when Apple rolls out its new release. It's now supporting the Risk Communications Systems Standard, RCS messaging standard. So now that will be the next generation of SMS. And what's critical about that is within that payload protocol is what's called the verified sender. So that every SMS message or RCS message, both on Android or iOS devices, will now have a cryptographically signed, verified token to it. So that when you receive that message, I can be guaranteed that that message came from Bruce, or that message came from Skechers, the shoe company. And now the question, though, to your point, is how do we trust who issued that token? And how do we do that at scale? So there's a company called Aegis that I work with, and they're processing now anywhere from 6,000 to 25,000 entity verifications to issue that token, so that that company then that turns around and starts sending those messages can actually be verified. And so the whole issue of how do we actually do trust at scale in this way, I think is going to be one of the biggest problems that we're going to be facing over the next few years.
To that point,
Chuck, go ahead.
To that point, I'm afraid that, you know, I think you're being overly optimistic. It's going to go anywhere. This problem has been addressed. I've worked probably 30 years of my career in working that kind of problem, certificates and certificate issuing systems, online certificate status protocols, regulatory authorities, all the work of the tab form, the CA browser. This is an area that everybody has wanted to address, except for, you know, the nation states that want to impose systems such as the obvious examples. I'm not confident we're going to see any widely accepted solutions occur anywhere other than potentially a narrow industry context. It's just been too hard to problem to solve. I just see way too many people poking at it. It's just gone nowhere. We can't even solve the password. And I don't see any hope for that anytime soon, because too many special interests want passwords the way they are, because it's a tracking. So, yeah, I'm just skeptical. Share that.
We're out of time. Any last questions? I mean, I can continue on this for hours, but out of respect for you, Bri, and everyone else, we can wrap it up. Maybe we can have you back one day. But I, for one, wanted to tell you and just thank you. I thought this conversation was absolutely amazing. And I'm going to have to be rewatching it multiple times to suck it all in. Anybody else have any final comment, remarks, thoughts, ideas?
I just want to say thank you. Yeah, I do appreciate, connecting with and hearing from and hearing feedback from thoughtful, thoughtful and intelligent and high integrity people. And it looks like, so it's so this has been a great workshop for me as well. Thank you so much, Michael, for the invite. And what I'm doing here is I'm just actually, this is what I like to do is I collect the Zoom Zoom notes, and I put it into a note. And I just organize a little bit about from the meeting. And so you're seeing a little bit of my kind of post-meeting wrap up here. Because to me, every time I do this, it just makes my AI smarter, right? So, and anyway, I just appreciate everyone here, and yeah, it's great. Yeah.
This was awesome, and hopefully you can join the community too. Join our messaging. Come back. We hold this every other Saturday and every other Sunday, and it'd be great to have you part of the community.
Cool, perfect. Yeah, cool. That's a group. I'll connect with you more, and I'll definitely be back.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Have a great Saturday.
Thanks, everyone. Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.